Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Je suis extrêmement heureux de vous accueillir aujourd'hui pour une nouvelle conférence virtuelle de l'initiative IA et Société. I am delighted to welcome you today for a new AI and Society virtual talk. For those who don't know me, my name is Florian Martin Barreto, and I am the director of the AI and Society Initiative. I am an associate professor and the University of Ottawa Research Chair in Technology and Society. I'm also the director of the university's Center for Law, Technology and Society. Today's virtual event is presented as part of our project on AI for Healthy Humans and Environments, supported by the Alex Trebek Forum for Dialogue, and co-stewarded by three leading Ottawa research groups, the Center for Law, Technology and Society, the Center for Health Law, Policy and Ethics, and the Institute for Science, Society and Policy. For today's event, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Anna Goldenberg and Dr. Colleen M for a conversation around the emergence of AI in healthcare and the legal concerns that emerge. Dr. Anna Goldenberg is a senior scientist in genetics and genome biology at the SickKids Research Institute. She is also an associate professor at the University of Toronto and a CFAR AI chair and associate director of health at the Vector Institute. She will be in conversation with my colleague, Dr. Colleen M, who is the University Research Chair in Health Law and Policy at the University of Ottawa and a full professor in the Faculty of Law Common Law section. Dr. Floud is the inaugural director of the University of Ottawa Center for Health Law, Policy and Ethics and the research lead on AI and health at the AI and Society Initiative. This conversation will be facilitated by Pascal Thibault, the Associate Director of the Center for Health Law, Policy and Ethics. I will please ask you to ask you questions in the conversation tab. You will just have to click on the bubble button at the top of your screen, and Pascal will then ask them to our guest. Thank you again for attending our virtual event, and without further ado, I will hand it over to Pascal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florian. Much appreciated. Maybe we'll start with Anna. I think we have quite a large number of potentially law students or people who are not really certain what AI is here. So if you could give us a brief intro on what makes something artificial intelligence instead of regular technology, and maybe some of the terms that you think you're gonna maybe using here, like deep learning, machine learning. What's the difference between all of those terms?
Thank you, Pascal, and thank you everybody for inviting me. Just to preface this, my background, my PhD is in machine learning, which is something I'll define in a second, but is a driving force behind a lot of the AI, recent AI successes. And for the last 12 years, I've been working in the area of biology and healthcare as a faculty. 9 years as a faculty, 12 years, including postdocs. So artificial intelligence, people in the media sort of lump everything into one, but there are two ways in which artificial intelligence should be thought of. One is generalized AI, which is the capacity to perform human intelligence tasks by machines, including ability to extrapolate to tasks that they weren't explicitly programmed to do, or to generalize to other situations that they weren't ever trained in or meant to be trained in. This doesn't exist. So this is the subject of movies, old and new, but the generalized AI doesn't really exist. The narrow sense AI is the ability to perform specific human intelligence tasks at the level of humans or beyond. That definitely exists already. And AlphaGo, that you might have read about, and AlphaFold, which just came out last week, a new tool for protein folding using, again, deep learning, are examples of these tools that far supersede human capacity. Machine learning is essentially a combination of algorithms and statistics, and as I said, driving force behind the narrow sense AI in the recent years, and this includes the developments that are largely present in healthcare, including tools for diagnosis, prognosis, treatment, etc. And deep learning that you might have heard of is just one of the tools in machine learning. So you might have heard of regression, that's another tool. And deep learning is a large field and it works really well on structured data. And when you have a lot of data, it works really, really well, but it is not applicable in every situation. So machine learning is a much bigger field than deep learning, even though deep learning has been doing really well in recent years because we have a lot more data and new approaches as well.
Great, thank you. You gave in your answer a couple of example of what AI can do in a healthcare context, like prediction. Can you give a couple of other ones, and then after maybe Colleen, you can bring up and give us an overview of some of the legal and ethical problems surrounding the use of AI in healthcare, like maybe of some of the example brought up by Anna.
So I can give you examples of a couple of projects that my lab is working on, just to make it very concrete. For example, we have been developing a tool that can detect an incoming cardiac arrest ahead of time. So we take in the streaming physiological data in ICU, and we predict, we output a risk, an assessment of risk of cardiac arrest. So this is one example. Another example is in urology. There's such a problem as hydronephrosis, a problem of inflated kidneys, and which may lead to very adverse events. So the kids are being monitored, and there are very invasive procedures that are being done on kids to confirm that maybe they are deteriorating to the point of needing a surgery. So we are trying to use ultrasound. We have developed a tool that uses ultrasound to try to avoid the invasive procedures where necessary. So a lot of the kids who get invasive treatment or scans, they don't get surgery. So less than 50% of them get surgery. So if the surgery is ultimately not needed, maybe we can predict it directly from the ultrasound by looking at it more holistically and with more sophisticated tools, and not have to use this. So these are just two, but we have many more.
Shall I jump in, Pascal? Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, so, well, first of all, it's just such a delight to talk with Anna, who, I've had the pleasure of being on a couple of committees with her. And, I think as a legal scholar, trying to understand more about what artificial intelligence and machine learning will really amount to in healthcare, that insights from Anna and others of her discipline are just essential to this. Like, I can't do my work, I think, without really understanding the technology to some degree. And so first of all, just let me start out by saying, as a legal scholar, you've got to kind of hope for the best but anticipate the worst, right? That's basically our job, is to imagine all the terrible things that could possibly happen, and then to provide for that in sort of legal and governance structures. So I just want to start out by, when I talk about concerns that we might have from a legal perspective, that's not to undercut the great hope that there is with the introduction of AI and machine learning into healthcare systems. So I think sometimes when we talk about this, when I see social scientists talking about AI in healthcare, they have a very Pollyanna-ish view of what the healthcare system is like now, run by humans, and that machines must always be worse than humans, that there's something fantastic about humans. But humans in healthcare have led to a lot of problems. So we have very high rates of medical error. We call that iatrogenic injury. So basically, going into a hospital is a very dangerous pastime if you're wanting to engage in it, even more dangerous these days. Physicians, nurses, and others, although they're incredibly well trained, they do make mistakes, both in diagnosis and in treatment. They also make mistakes around things like privacy, and they make mistakes around things like informed consent. So I think the first thing to remember is that we are not starting with, this beautiful rainbows and ponies kind of healthcare system. And what we want is for AI and machine learning to do, as many have portended, which is to radically transform that healthcare system, to improve quality and safety in particular, to improve efficiency, to help eliminate things like wait times where there's no need really to be waiting because we do have the resources in the system. It's just how we're marshalling them. So to overall make things much, much better. Okay, so that's on the bright side, and I think we have to always keep that in mind when we're making trade-offs about what we do and don't do from a regulatory perspective. But a lot of ink has already been spilt on what are some of the worries with the introduction of AI and machine learning, and I think we have to be careful about, okay, what are real worries, which is basically people worried about what are real worries and what are sort of false worries. And so I think the real worries are around safety and quality. So, and we will talk more about this, I think, in a minute, but this idea of garbage in and garbage out, and if AI, machine learning, is trained on inadequate data, then it can be problematic if, for example, a physician or a nurse or a pharmacist is relying on the support of the AI to make a decision, but the AI is not actually trained to really speak to the person in front of them, the patient in front of them, because they're part of a marginalized group or a particular race, and there just hasn't been enough, inputs into the AI for it to really say anything cogent about that patient. So that is a major worry, and we can come back to that question. The other worries that we have are things, physicians and doctors, sorry, those are the same things. Physicians in particular, but worry about, or have been worrying about being replaced by AI and machine learning. And I think a lot of them now feel happier. The discourse is more like, look, you're not going to be replaced. This is going to support you. You're still going to be, your hand on the tiller. AI will help you to do your job. And so that's great to a certain extent. But the problem here is if physicians don't actually understand the AI, if they don't really know at all about, for example, problems with the data that it's been trained on, or really how it's made its decision in any vague kind of way, but the patient is relying on the physician. The physician is saying, which is the ethos of medicine. Patient, I need you to trust me. You have to rely on me. I'm the person with the information. I'm the person that should take the decision. I think this is problematic where the physician, him or herself, doesn't actually understand in any kind of general sense the decision making of the AI. And this, of course, then leads to liability questions. So if something does go wrong, we expect that generally fewer things will go wrong with AI because overall we expect to see, very significant improvements in safety and quality. But it may be, as with, for example, prescription drugs, that if something does go wrong with AI, and many physicians are using it, it's become the standard of care, for example, in surgery, to use a particular AI tool. And all surgeons are using this particular AI tool, and it somehow fails. Just as when everyone is using a particular prescription drug, then many people could be harmed, right? As opposed to, a physician making an error vis-a-vis one patient. So So that's why, even although the numbers of times that errors will happen will be hopefully very small, when it does happen, it could be, a significant harm. So we have to figure out liability, and we need to make sure that the law is focused on putting all the right incentives in place. We want innovators to do a good job. We want manufacturers to do a good job. We want physicians to do a good job. So in my view, law's got to be calibrated to helping people to do a good job, so that at the end of the day, we get all the fruits of AI in healthcare. I think that should be our goal, rather than trying to protect people from liability. Our eye should be on the prize, and the prize is better healthcare for Canadians, right? That's the prize. So then the question is how to get there. So I haven't covered all the worries, that lawyers have, but we'll get to them, Pascal.
Can
go ahead, Anna.
Can I answer some of these worries? So I think not having the right patient is a real worry, because the data is limited, and not every clinic sees every patient that they might see in the future. But I think there are ways to deal with that, and there are ways to deal with that from the AI perspective, of course, and from the software engineering perspective in general, where the AI should not be making a decision where it doesn't have a way to rely on a decision, or it should say, I really have not, this is not the domain I was trained on, and I cannot make an adequate decision for this. There are no guarantees, right? When we train our models, we can sort of guarantee some performance or some level of performance for the data that it's been trained on. Once you start looking at the data that it has not been trained on, all the guarantees go out the window. That's why I think this definitions of sort of where machine learning and AI is that it's a narrow sense AI. It's trained for a specific task on a specific population. So this is not. This is not escaping a AI scientist. I think when we are talking about production systems, many AI and healthcare researchers are raising the point that there have to be flags to say this. We cannot do well for this patients given what we've been trained on. So I think what the system has been trained on. So this is one question which I think is not hard. The question of liability is very interesting, and I think there is a natural evolution to this technology. We forget, we start talking about AI, and somehow AI is by itself in the middle of the field, but that's not what's happening. AI is being developed by humans. It is based on human input, and it is based on and it is collaborating with humans to make decisions right now. I don't think anybody should start relying on a system that they don't understand at all. And by understand, I don't mean formulas. I mean really understanding what is the expected output given a particular input. Right? The same way that we are currently operating with, say, whole body MRI machines, right? I had given a talk at St. Jude's not too long ago, and they said, well, whole body MRIs are a good example. I don't exactly, this was a trained radiologist that was in the field for a long time. She says, I don't quite understand exactly how that machine works, but I know exactly what I'm seeing and how to interpret that. And I think that is what we are striving for right now. I think it is important to remember that they are that the liability, for as long as these tools are sort of not good enough, which they're not right now because of the limited data and the silos, which I'm sure we'll touch upon, because no discussion about AI in healthcare avoids that issue. But for as long as the systems are really imperfect, and they can't be perfect, we have to be working with these systems. The clinicians have to be working with these systems to ensure that they understand them, that because they are liable. There's for right now, there's no reality of being replaced anybody by anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so Pascal, can I just add a little bit here? So when we talk about regulation of AI, just so that everyone understands that there isn't any specific regulation of AI in healthcare or generally. But we obviously do have laws that relate to AI in healthcare and speak to some of the concerns. But what we have is, it's just by accident, it's not by design. And so I think what we have to figure out is whether our existing governance structures and laws are appropriate for the challenges that we have, that they sufficiently encourage innovators and AI innovation and AI adoption where it's good, and punish those that might not do the kinds of things that Anna spoke of in the first place. So what we have in Canada is a mishmash, I guess. We have some federal laws about regulating quality of medical devices, so pre-market clearance of medical devices, which may have an impact on AI and machine learning. We have various provincial and federal laws around privacy, which may impact the collection of data. We have different laws around discrimination. So we're sort of starting to talk about algorithmic bias, which may have an impact. And then we also have the regulatory colleges, so the colleges of physicians and surgeons, colleges of nurses that have ethics codes for their professions and will set standards of practice. And then we have what we call private law. So we have the common law, so no specific legislation, but we have laws that have built up over time around, for example, medical malpractice. So when will a physician be found to have been negligent in the treatment of a patient? And then in addition to that, we have contract law. So this is where some of the worries that I have about what you said, Anna, I'm going to solve that problem by making sure when I do my AI design, it's all, I will alert the end user. One will imagine that many manufacturers, counseled by lawyers, will say, okay, what we want to do is exclude all liability for the manufacturer and the innovator and dump that down onto the hospital or the physician. So, it may be that in that situation, you don't have the proper set of incentives coming back to the innovator to actually do what you said that should be doing. So that makes me think we do need to think about whether or not we need some at least minimal requirements from perhaps the federal government or otherwise to make sure that we don't at least have people selling AI applications or devices that don't at least come with proper warnings, just as we do with prescription drugs, right? They have warnings about when you should and shouldn't use them. Some of them are useless, so we don't want to go on to that, the 75 pages of carve-outs. But, that's what we'll get, right? Because as you rightly say, AI is not by itself in the middle of the lawn, right? It's all the humans around it that we have to actually speak to from a legal perspective. So I think we've just busted out your questions, Pascal. Too bad. Go ahead.
Hey, it's fine. It's great to have you feed off of each other on that. So I don't know if Anna, you want to answer to that or move to one of the question. So up to you.
Well, there is a sort of I think there are precedents in all areas where we use technology even without humans now, right? So if you go back 100 years, the traffic was regulated by people. now we know the traffic is regulated by traffic lights, which function pretty well. Right? It took some time, but right now they function pretty well. And if we were to put in a human in the loop, it creates huge inefficiencies, right? You've all been stuck in traffic due to a human trying to operate that because traffic light is not working. So what happens if the traffic light stops working or malfunctions? Who is liable? Is it the manufacturer? No, it's just it becomes such a part of our life that it's taken offline. Right, it's recognized, taken offline, it's fixed. We have a solution in place. We have trained people who can do this, and then it's put back in. And I'm just wondering how much we are trying to reinvent things for AI because it sounds new, as opposed to really thinking back to this specific problem has been solved or is a problem of technology in general, right? And having the technology in general, this will be a very similar sort of problem that we've already tackled.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, Anna. And let me be clear that, you know, finding the right regulatory framework doesn't mean you regulate for the hell of it, right? Like you've got to only intervene from a legal perspective if the benefits outweigh the costs. So, you know, you don't want to do more harm than good. And but it would be a mistake to think that there isn't laws in place already. There are. There are human actors, and those are governed by a whole bunch of legal regimes, and that is very much going to impact the uptake and efficacy of AI in healthcare right now. So it may be that liability rules will make physicians and other healthcare providers nervous about adopting beneficial AI. They will worry that it might, you know, that they will worry about it if they don't really understand it. They may not move to it quickly enough. And tort law might actually support that. So someone who might break out of the box and use AI, and, you know, hopefully this would not happen, but if something did go wrong, that would, you know, hugely set back the project for some time to come. So I think the first thing, you know, what we're planning to do as part of the work we're embarking on is to actually do a bit of a forensic of the laws that are there on the books, because I think that's what we have to do first, and to understand how they all mesh together. So how does the, you know, federal rules around regulation of medical devices, how does that mesh with various laws that exist at the provincial level around anti-discrimination and privacy and so on? And how does that mesh with what's happening with regulatory colleges? I don't think we actually have, no one's done that. We don't actually know that. So we have all this existential angst about things, but we don't really know how it's being catered to. And we need to extrapolate from common law to this particular case scenario of AI in healthcare to try to figure out how judges might respond to various claims that might come forward. So it's not like we're starting from ground zero with the law either, right? The law is already there. And I think we need to get rid of and recalibrate laws that don't work well to support beneficial AI coming into healthcare. But we might need to fine tune some. And we might need some bespoke ones, just as we do for many other things.
Right.
Again, AI shouldn't be different from other technologies. We regulate prescription drugs. We don't just let them come onto the market without some sort of oversight. So it's not to say, again, we need to learn from our mistakes. And I think the problem is that law, once it's fixed in place, is very slow to move. So we definitely want to make sure that we have in place fairly nimble and responsive kinds of regulation, and to really try to think about how to do that, and that this is a very fast-moving area. So I feel, though, that to some extent what we hear a lot about is, we don't want to get in the way of innovation, so we're not going to do anything. And I think, that again ignores the fact that there are all these laws in place, and that responsible innovators want to do the right thing. So if you have a good regulatory framework that supports them to do that, you're actually going to help them. And that if something does go wrong, you are going to see a hue and a cry, very early on. And I think you'll get far more draconian laws than is actually good for the public interest.
Right.
So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen as well. So there's sort of this political economy of lawmaking that we have to be attendant to as well. So I think all these things have to go into the hopper to figure out the best result. That's why I need you to work with me.
I am happy to work with you. I think the one thing to prevent something terrible from happening is setting realistic expectations of AI right now, because sometimes we hear, like, we develop an algorithm and the clinician we are working with says, what, it's below 95% accuracy? What is this? No, I'm not interested in this. And I'm like, what's your accuracy? How? Yeah, what? We are we are looking at your data and we are trying to sort of match it when trying to do as much or as well. And I think the expectations, given the kind of data that we see and the fact that not everything is recorded. So clinician says, oh, this person, they walked in and their gait, there was something about it, right? They put it through their internal classifier that is not recorded anywhere, that is personalized to their experiences. And based on that, they made a decision. Right? Yes, they all trained, and they trained really well. But there is a lot of experiential based information that they would draw from the environment that is never recorded, that the AI has no access to, and so it will not do as well in some of the situations. I can give an example. In fact, we were predicting which nodule, a thyroid nodule, is likely to be malignant. And there was one patient in which the algorithm was fairly confident that the nodule is benign. And we were wrong. And the clinician said, oh, yes, this case, actually, I know this case exactly, is very special. It turned out they had this history in the family where the father had the nodule, and none of that information was available to the algorithm. So if it were, maybe it wouldn't have made such a decision so confidently. So it will be making mistakes. The system will be making mistakes. That's why there is no, the liability is still on the clinician, and it still comes in my mind, as an additional piece of information that they have to take into account, or may want to take into account in their decision making. But they have, at least for as long as they have more information, which they currently do, I don't think AI can be expected to be an all in all. But the tools and the rules and the sort of the algorithms that we are uncovering, even the data that they are using, are better than the clinical cases. Because, for example, I think 6% of the cases of thyroid nodules are resected when they didn't need to be. Right. And we can certainly help with additional information to reduce that.
Yeah, I think the issue of bias on the part of physicians themselves is a significant one, and their own natural kind of assumption. We all assume we're good drivers, right? Statistically, this can't be true. I think, all surgeons assume that they're very good surgeons. Statistically, it can't be true. We have that sort of psychological frame on our own abilities. So I do think that the major upside of AI is to support far better decision making, to be a check on someone's biases or perceived thinking that they are an expert on X and Y. At least it can be a check on what they are doing. But over time, I think, Anna, it will become more that this is a standard of care, that you should use an AI application So at first, I think there'll be quite a bit of resistance, but over time, it will become a standard of care, and that could be problematic, both because in particular individualized circumstances, a physician might say, well, I have this other piece of data that the AI doesn't, so I've chosen to go another way. That may be difficult for a physician in a medical negligence case, so we have to see how that will play out. But then also, the easier thing may be for the physician just to go with the AI advice rather than to risk being found wanting, right? So there are risks either way. So I think, we have to sort of think about, right now it's all new and novel relatively, but say 15 years from now, right, when AI is being used in all sorts of settings, just as they recommend drugs in all sorts of settings, are they really, do they really have much option anymore? Is the law permitting that? And if it's not, then we have to think about what you've just said here and try to figure out how we can make sure that law will permit physicians to take that very, idiosyncratic data and make those choices at the margin. And what do you do with a patient who says, well, I just really wish you'd followed the AI because then I'd still be alive or not hurt? Yeah. So, but perhaps we might do we want to talk about some of the other problems and, not problems, benefits of AI with little wrinkles on the side?
Sure. I think we cover the safety aspect a little bit here. Maybe we'll jump onto the privacy question. Anna, you mentioned earlier, you flagged that like we wanted to talk about like data being siloed and like all those things. Obviously, it's hard not to talk about privacy while talking about access to data. So obviously, like, proper access to data and quality data is very challenging for researchers. As you mentioned, it's often siloed, and this is slowing down the pace of AI innovation. From your perspective, like how can the laws be like modified to like empower people like you to have access to the data you need and enable like better care?
I don't know if I know that the law is preventing me from accessing data. I know that there are various interpretations that are preventing data access. But the one thing that I have to impart on you is that data is the blood of AI in healthcare. There will be no AI, no innovation, no diagnosis, prognosis, treatment if the data is not accessible, if we have no access to data. And right now, this is the biggest headache by far that we have. We have problems accessing healthcare data, and I think it's most highlighted by COVID. Right. So we just recently, I think, working with the ministry, the plan was to get this data in early July. We got access to some portion of the data about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So at which point we can start maybe developing tools, and this is just the first round of data. The goal was to sort of have the first round and augment it and have much richer data at the end. I think there are so many rules about privacy and so many ways to privacy, I guess, and security that people, I feel like there's a lot of fear in the decision making. To me, I think that we should clamp down on the other side, right? If something nefarious happens, why don't we have the sort of a very severe punishment for all of these cases where it could happen? Because there are cases in the US, for example, with a mimic data where an ICU has released, I think starting 2003, this project has been going with Beth Deaconess Hospital. Nobody reverse engineered this data. Nobody went and started targeting patients whose data this was. But that data alone has enabled almost the whole field of AI in healthcare. There are very few papers right now, out of thousands, that are not using that data as a benchmark because there's no really other data available for research. And I feel like researchers have it the worst, because companies, people want something from a company, and so they just give the data directly. They sign whatever, click, done, and they give up so much of their data to the companies, and the companies have a lot of data, but researchers really truly have it the worst. I think now I feel like the patients are being protected from better care because we are not able to access the data. We are not able to make better inference. We are not able to build these innovative tools that can solve some of the questions that humans are unable to solve because the data is complex.
Yeah, I think this is, I think you've hit it on the head, Anna, that it's not really the law on the books so much, as much as how it's interpreted by various layers of institutional decision making, and the privacy officers and various, often people without actually any legal training, sometimes interpreting these things that make it very complicated. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous that you asked for the data in July in the context of COVID.
We asked for the data in March. They told us it will be available in July.
And you're still just getting it now. So that is clearly, deeply problematic. I think, the law on the books is pretty much if the data is de-identified, then you're able to use it for research purposes. And some people might have some concerns about that because of the risk of re-identification, but that's what the law provides. But then, there are all sorts of research ethics boards and others, as we said, that may interpret things differently. And I think that you make the excellent point that without the best data, AI can't make the best decisions. And so we talked about algorithmic bias and the problems there. And this is of concern because, of course, many marginalized groups or vulnerable populations may not be that excited to actually hand their data over to researchers and to institutions because historically they've been treated very badly. And it has been used in ways that have been targeted folks. And of course, when there's only relatively few people, it is more possible, I think, even if the data is de-identified, to identify, in fact, or to maybe assume, even if you don't really know, to target someone because of their sexual orientation or their race. So I think that's the worry, and I think in that regard, there has to be really open conversations with vulnerable populations, and to get them to come to trust that the research community will use this data properly. So I think that's got to be part of the solution going forward. Yeah, Anna?
Yeah, a couple of points. One is that I'm not 100% sure how much it is the decision of the vulnerable populations right now to not share their data, as opposed to, yet again, white people in the government trying to protect them for their own good. I think there's so much fear that there will be an uproar that they're not even asked properly. Yeah. I think there are indigenous populations where we've been saying, we are trying to build these tools for COVID for AI. We will not be able to do anything for indigenous folks if you don't give us any indigenous data. And they say, oh, well, but this is very hard. There are different rules and the privacy. And I said, ask them. Why don't we meet and we tell them what we are planning to do, and they tell us we don't want this?
Yeah.
Do they know that this is what we are proposing? Do they know what are the benefits and the risks to them of what is being proposed? Are they able to make informed decisions themselves? Who is negotiating and talking to them? And I have to say that maybe, I mean, most certainly the history shows that vulnerable populations have reasons to be concerned about how their data will be used, but they have to be asked, they have to be told what the plan is, and they have to be empowered with the knowledge of what are their options and make that informed choice themselves. I am not seeing that happening. Not. I'm seeing token sort of people, one at a time at a sort of a 20-person table where they may or may not have time to say anything for themselves. I
think
have to
the interactions with the communities themselves, the affected communities, I think is the key part of this. I think on the other side of it, so that's about the data going in, Anna, at the time that you're training the AI. I think people also, rightly or wrongly, will have worries about in a medical encounter that their data is being collected in some way and possibly repurposed for other uses. And so I think patients are going to need some security around knowing what's happening with their personal health information. And again, we come back to the fact that I think physicians are going to need to know more about or understand a bit more about how, what is the AI doing with the data, if anything. Is there any possibility of de-identification here? What do they need to tell the patient about that as part of the informed consent process? So, I don't think we really have figured that out from a legal perspective yet, and I think it's something we have to attend to ensure that there's trust from patients when their healthcare providers are using AI as part of diagnosis or treatment.
I completely agree with you, and this information has to be available for the people. I don't know how we can forecast when we are, even if there were consent, there is no way to kind of forecast all the ways in which the data can be used to help them. I think, again, there has to be a way to say that this data will not be used for harming patients, and that has to be vigilantly controlled, as opposed to not even giving the data in the first place because of a fear that something bad might happen. In that case, we are just completely
so that it won't be ever used to discriminate against you in an employment context or an insurance context or these kinds of things. And I tend to agree with you in this regard that I think we need stronger penalties at the end for wrongdoing as opposed to all sorts of barriers up front. I think I'm more of the view, though, that we need a few more barriers up front for the development of safe and reliable AI, for example, around algorithmic bias. So, a different mix and match of regulatory responses is what we need.
I think you're right, and we didn't really talk to a large extent about bias because it will be a real issue that some of us are thinking about and incorporating into our research very deeply, and some are not. And of course, there's this example. I don't know. For me, I heard it from the UCSF colleagues, where EPIC, right, our biggest EMR, has developed an application to see who will not show up for their appointments, and they used race and socioeconomic status as the input variables, and alone. And of course, when that system was implemented, they basically overbooked African American population. entirely. So people who are already vulnerable and who already need more support, they and when Epic was contacted to say, look, you have a really biased tool here, this is not appropriate, they said, no, it's up to you how you choose to implement it. You didn't have to overbook all the African Americans. We didn't project that. So there has to be a lot of care in sort of knowing that in the design, to know that the bias is not being exacerbated in such a grotesque sort of way. And they had a data science team who immediately designed a new tool where they controlled for these variables and made sure that they are not front and center. But there will be people, because this is a hot area, there will be people who sort of picked up some knowledge here and there. They call themselves AI, and they do less rigorous work. So yes, there have to be evaluations in place to make sure that something like this does not happen, and there have to be evaluations at the place of deployment. There have to be evaluations at the place of design to make sure that this kind of events do not occur.
And I think as well that although, the sense is that we shouldn't have bespoke, a lot of people speak to this, that we shouldn't have, particularized laws for AI. I think in the healthcare context, we have particularized laws for healthcare because of the particular vulnerability of patients in a healthcare setting and the knowledge and balance between physicians and patients. And that's like 150, 200 years in the making. So I think the particular vulnerability of patients, of healthcare, I think we do need to remember that when we're thinking about appropriate regulation, because it might sound like a small thing, overbooking, but that could mean that you miss an important diagnosis for cancer treatment, right? So it's not just an inconvenience factor. Missed tests, missed results, misdiagnosis, these kinds of things, really can relate to your very life in some circumstances.
And I'm wondering, because this happens a lot right now, right? The humans are very good at making these kind of mistakes themselves as well. So the question is, when a system that is learning from the human data that was collected, is there a way to flag it, right? What if this actually happens? How fast can we flag it and remove it? And how do we empower patients to say, hey, wait a minute, this is wrong?
I think that's the really interesting technological challenge, is how to use technology to be a check on the technology itself. And, when we have discussed that there are many errors that humans and healthcare systems are making, but then we've also said we're not taking humans out of the mix here. Humans are interacting with the technology. And I think the worry is that using the technology can be an excuse for doing all sorts of bad things that you may or may have done before in the past anyway, right? So it's that interaction of technology and the humans themselves in the healthcare setting that we really got to be attendant to, what the incentive effects are and how to govern that to make sure, as I said, with an eye on the prize of beneficial healthcare, better healthcare system for all Canadians.
Well, believe it or not, we're already at 1 p.m. Maybe I'll give it 2 minutes each to give concluding remark, and I'll start already to thank everyone for coming. It's going to be obviously the last event of the year for the Alex Trebek AI event. If you want to follow the news around Alex Trebek in the Tech Center, you can sign up for a newsletter at aisociety.ca ou iasociete.ca. I'll give it back to Anna and Colleen.
Well, thanks again for inviting me. I think it's fascinating, and it gives me great pleasure to work with Colleen, because it's the area I don't know much about, but I really would like to understand where we are and how do we empower research in this area and development in this area in a sort of safe and secure manner, rather than preventing it at the front. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm sort of looking forward, because we do have a joint goal of improving our healthcare system, and there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you, Anna. There's a lot of room for improvement, and when I think, looking out sort of 20 years from now, the goal that we would have to radically improve safety and quality of care, to eradicate wait times, to make sure that people are treated in the best location possible, right? So if you don't need to be in a hospital, you shouldn't be in a hospital. There are a lot of things that have to happen, not just the technology, to realize that vision, right? Good governance of healthcare and health policy making. And I think, as we've seen in the last kind of 9 months or so, we're a little bit short in that space. So, I think we've really got to work together. I think this, the AI plus society vision of bringing people from different disciplines together is the way to go. It's the only way we're going to solve these, tricky problems.
I agree.
Thanks, Pascal.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. It was amazing. And again, thanks everyone for attending. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Au revoir.